felt it would give us the best access to the strongest possible group of senior insurance decision makers.
Insurtech Insights is a must-do conference, I think, for the network that is built here.
I'm joined here by my esteemed colleagues and dear friends for a casual chat on what AI means to each of us. There's a lot of buzz, just like Tom mentioned, but there's also a lot of fear. Fear of missing out, fear of losing jobs, excitement of how AI will solve all humanity's problems. And the answer is somewhere else. So what we're going to do today is have a casual chat, but plain speaking, of how we are using AI, what we see as the strengths and limitations of it. I'll start off introductions, and I'll let my friends introduce themselves. But before that, so there's three things you take away would be how are we deploying AI in real life as opposed to academic scenarios? What are some of the lessons learned? What advice does this group have for the audience? And then as we look ahead, what do we see coming down the road? I'll start with Juan Andrade, CEO of USAA, and I'll let him introduce himself and tell us a little bit about his company.
That's great. Nirav, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you all for being here with us this morning. I'm Juan Andrade. I'm the CEO of USAA. We are proud to serve 14 million members, and we have a significant focus on helping military families achieve financial well-being. I've been in the insurance industry for over 30 years. And in addition to that, I served our country for 8 years prior to that, so close to 40 years between public and private sector experience.
Thanks for that, Juan. Glad that you can make it here. Next up is Mark Hammond, CFO of Assured Partners.
Good morning, everyone, and it's great to be here with two former colleagues, right, and people I hung around with a fair amount for a while. So, look, I'm a finance guy, right, and I've been at this a long time. We say 30 plus or whatever. You put a plus on the end when it's longer than you care to admit that you've been in this industry, right? But literally kind of started with it day one, really through two lenses. The first, I was a service provider to the industry. I was an audit partner with Deloitte in public accounting business. And served almost exclusively insurance clients for some 17, 18 plus years. And then after that got into industry and started working for carriers, worked for two or three of those. It's where you and I crossed paths. Same with you, Nirav. And then now most recently I'm in the brokerage side of that business and work for a company called Assured Partners. We have about 10,000 employees, agents and brokers kind of across the network in the US and the UK, broking business on behalf of small business into carriers. So my perspective and comments today will really kind of come through the lens of finance.
Thanks for that, Mark. Hi, I'm Nirav Dagli. I'm the CEO and founder of Spinnaker Analytics. We are a 25-year-old firm based in Boston. Before I started the firm that does predictive analytics, AI algorithms, and related consulting, back in graduate school, I developed satellite communications algorithms for the US Army, after which insurance analytics seems a little bit easier. So now I will turn it back. Maybe we'll start with one, which is we do AI, but when an AI vendor pitches to you, what comes to your mind first?
So you mean when you're pitching me?
Yes.
I didn't know I could sell.
From my perspective, it's really about the business problem that we're trying to solve. The technology is important, and certainly there's been a lot of strides that have been made in the last 3 years, particularly with the advent of Gen AI. But ultimately, what is the issue that we need to solve? And that's really what we're listening for at this point in time. You know, in our case, we deal with hundreds of thousands of calls on a monthly basis. And how can we become more efficient? How can we become more effective at providing better service to our members? So it's really about the business problem.
Thanks, Juan. Your turn to bat. Wow.
Wow, same thing, right? Likewise, when you're in both of our offices pitching, right? So look, I'm the finance guy. The first part of that has got to be what? What's it going to cost, right? And what do I think the return on that investment looks like? And generally it comes through, kind of two channels. One, is it an efficiency play, right? And that's where, at least in my world today, where we see most of the early applications of this, right? It makes us better and faster at some process that we were otherwise doing. So, am I being pitched something that says you're gonna make your existing processes more efficient? I've got time for that kind of conversation, right? I think the one that's a little more challenging is, okay, now it's gonna make you better at selling your product. You're going to grow revenue faster. You're going to do those. I'm probably more skeptical based on where AI is in its evolution right now around the revenue side of the P&L than I am around the cost efficiency side of the P&L. So it's much like Juan said. It is, okay, do you understand my business, and how are you going to make this relevant to me in terms of what you're trying to sell me? So you can take that away next time you come visit. Right?
I should be taking notes right now. When an AI vendor pitches to us, my first response is, why are you pitching to us? We do AI.
Yeah.
So, one of the things we do is demystify AI. What is artificial intelligence? When I was in graduate school, speech recognition was artificial intelligence. Nobody thinks about that since Siri came out. What started with computing power was data mining. And then soon after that came machine learning. And that's what people started thinking about as AI. Then for a while, there was not much going on. There was blockchain, but not much sound about AI. And then when ChatGPT came out, generative AI, that's when the AI buzz that we hear today around us has been taking hold of everybody's imagination, which is largely text prediction. Where do we go next from here? This quantitative AI. That's what Spinnaker does. We look at numerical information and identify patterns in them in order to create the insights. But already the world is moving beyond text into sentiment analysis, image processing, and even reasoning AI. We're still some distance away from that, and while everybody's talking about artificial general intelligence, that's not happening yet or anytime soon. So it's important to understand that the definition of AI evolves just as AI itself evolves. Now, I'm going to turn it back to Juan. Can you walk us through where you have deployed AI successfully or not successfully, and what are some of the lessons learned?
Yeah, for us, and I think as Nirav was saying, AI is not new, and it's something that we have been using, either rule-based models or large language models, for a period of time. And we certainly apply it to claims, detect fraudulent claims, and improve customer service applications, et cetera. What's new now, and what's really become pretty exciting, frankly, over the last 2 or 3 years, is the speed and the scale, particularly of generative AI. And so from our perspective, it's really looking at making a lot of these high frequency processes be a lot more efficient and be a lot more effective. So I would say our customer service components are critical to that. We have been able to deploy tools across our 19,000 telephone reps to basically help them identify with 99% accuracy most of the daily questions, most of the more frequently asked questions that they get on any given call, regardless of the product that they're working on. So for us, that's been one of the key areas where we've deployed it. Another area that we've deployed it, frankly, with tremendous amount of success, and some of our friends from the claims organization are here, is really in catastrophe claims management, where it's really allowed us to reduce the number of days from 14 to 7 days where we can pay a claim after a wildfire, after a hurricane, et cetera, et cetera. And I would give the example of the Palisades fire in Los Angeles earlier this year, where we were using drone imagery, we were using AI married to that, to actually pay claims to our members before our members even knew they had a claim. And that's really an amazing thing when you start thinking about it, particularly in areas that have actually been denied not only for our claims adjusters, but also for the residents of the neighborhood themselves. So the ability to deploy that technology, look at the before and after, and actually get a check to one of our members before they even knew the state of their home is a phenomenal use of this technology.
And so, Juan, what has been the most important lesson learned? What has worked for you? What has been the best approach to successful deployment?
Yeah, I think for us, and it's a very practical thing, right? It's not about the hype, and as I said, the technology is fascinating, but it's really how you apply it. But a big part of being able to apply the technology successful is making sure that, at least in our case, our 38,000 employees are knowledgeable about what AI is, what it's not, and ultimately how they can use it to improve their business every day, essentially. We have been able to provide our employees with a suite of products, co-pilots, and a number of other things that actually are being used pretty proactively on a daily basis within the company. I mean, I use it myself to be able to summarize large amounts of information that come to you on a daily basis to really help you focus on what are the critical things that you ought to be taking away from a particular document, that sort of thing. But that education to your employees, I think, is one of the most critical things that we all need to do. The other thing that I would say is if you're in a place that says, I'm going to be a fast follower on this, it's going to be too late for you. There is no such thing as fast following with the rapid pace and how this thing is evolving. You got to be in it right now. And I think this is one of these places where I don't think you make a regrettable bet on the fact that AI can help you run your business better regardless of what you do.
Thanks. Mark, same question for you.
Yeah. So again, through that finance lens, right? And I often look at that role. People like Juan are my customer inside of a business, right? And it is, how we take financial information and translate it into something that's relevant. And I'll get to your question, but I can't do it without regressing just a little bit, right? Probably one of the most influential experiences I had in my career in terms of trying to make finance relevant and translate the language of finance into the language of business and into actions was I spent 7 years of my career in London, and while I was there I had an opportunity to go visit a well-known race car manufacturing company, right? That made and manufactured performance cars, and they had developed science around the use of data and information in running and building these race cars. And as a result of that, they had a bit of a consulting practice that grew out of it that I had an opportunity to go talk to them about when I was looking for just some very basic dashboard information that would allow me to take predictive analytics, put it in a way so that individuals like Juan and others could use it and make decisions, right? And one of the things that emerged from that conversation was they had done a pilot of a program where it had to do with London Heathrow Airport, right? And it was all about a process of how they could make that airport the most efficient they could as measured by a single thing, and that single thing was the on-time departures that existed from airlines, right? So you can imagine all the data and the information that they would accumulate to do that, whether inbound traffic, weather, everything that's feeding into it. Highly sophisticated model. But the thing that stood out for me was they took all that information in that model over the course of a day, and at any point in time within that, they would literally put on the screen of the users or the decision makers that at this moment in time do these 3 things, right? And it was always 3 things, and it said, do this. It might be cancel this flight, move this flight to a different gate, and reroute this somewhere else. And those 3 things would change as the data and the inputs occurred literally real time. But as opposed to finance being this function, and I think this is true around a lot of different functions, not just finance, as Good is more than do you collect the information and give it to somebody and allow them to decipher it and hope that they make the right decision. A good answer and a use of, coming back to answering your question, a great application of AI in this is, let me tell them what I think they should do. Based on the data and the information I have today, my example, here's the 3 things you need to do inside the organization right now, at least through a quantitative lens. The qualitative side is then the judgment that whoever the user is that's having to make the decision applies that information to the data and information. So, when I think about uses of it, it's taking the world of predictive analytics and now allowing you to overlay that with go do this, written out in the form of take these 2 or 3 actions. We used to try to solve that through natural language generation tools and things that on the top of financial dashboards would say this. All those could really do for us was say, you've got a variance in these things, so you should know to go look at it, right? Now with AI sitting on top of that, we can actually tell people, go do these actions. People that may not be, financially literate, right, that are, but that need to make decisions, that's the kind of thing we're trying to do.
And can you give me an example of what action AI is allowing you to generate the insight for that you can tell somebody in the business, whoever your customer is, let's say.
Yeah, so again, a finance lens for an example. We live in the world of historical information. What good looks like in finance is you take that historical information, you use it to predict the future, and then based on what you see that, what can I do today to influence it, right? So, look, we're in the sales business, right? We're brokers working with small business clients, and a lot of what happens on the revenue side of the equation for us is frequency of contacts and touch points and so on that would come through a CRM system, right? So I can now use the information from that CRM system and be able to predict, based on those activity levels, what I think things like revenue and costs are going to look like. So the action would be, hey, you've got this division or this person, right, or this region that is not going to hit that forecast because of this set of activities, and the simple action is you need to pick up the phone and call Nirav. You need to pick up the phone and call Juan. It's really that basic, but we now have something that would allow us to do things at that level of detail.
Great. I think when I listen to Juan and yourself, Mark, what we've done many deployments across carriers and brokers. What we say is, let's start with the business problem. Don't get stuck on what the technology can or cannot do. What is the business problem or priority you're trying to address? And that goes to your point, Juan. Not everybody needs to be an analytics expert in the company. People need to be analytically savvy at using the information and the insights that they are getting. The second thing we say is, let's start with the data you have. Just like human brains don't make use of more than 10% of our capacity, most organizations we come across don't make use of more than 10% of their data. Everybody's out building massive data lakes and creating infrastructure, but the CEO, the CFO, you guys need answers immediately to the questions you have. There's no need to go out and build everything and then hope for it. That's an answer you don't want to hear from an ROI point of view or from a time to market point of view. So start with the data that you have, and then let's get some quick wins. Let's start making use of the technology to solve those problems. Once it starts working, people will adopt. There's too much cultural resistance, fear, not knowing enough about it. All of that can be dispensed if you start taking small but concrete steps. So, looking forward, what do you see over the next 2 to 3 years where your organization or you will test or deploy AI in solving? And I'll start again with Juan.
Yeah, no, I think in our case, as we look forward, is using multimodality particularly on some of the Gen AI kind of tools of video, chat, text, putting all of this together to actually help you solve problems, right? And An ideal one for that is, how do we know it's you when you're calling us in a world where there's a lot of fraud? The ability to put up a driver's license and be able to do the facial recognition and the matching between a driver's license and that individual to be able to very quickly authenticate who you are at that point in time. The other issue for us is, there is a crisis in homeowners insurance in our country, right? Particularly if you live in places like Florida and California, there's an availability crisis from the perspective of it's just not available, and an affordability, if you can get it, is incredibly expensive. So how do you use some of this technology to actually help, in our case, our members, to be able to get access to insurance, but also to do it at a reasonable price? And so this is one of the ways that we're thinking and actually doing engagement right now with imagery and with other tools. We can tell what's around your property from a wildfire response perspective. We can proactively give you advice on how to mitigate damage to your house before it actually happens. And so these kinds of tools, I think, are a big part of the future and how we use this, not only for service, but also on the underwriting side of things. And eventually, and I think many of you know this, the technology is getting so good from an AI agent perspective that the voice aspect of it is not only very clear, very responsive, but the empathy is also starting to be there. So can you start using some of these AI agents for more high frequency, lower impact kind of calls without taking the human out of the middle of all of this, right? Because at the end of the day, particularly for exceptional customer service and for highly complex issues, particularly dealing with intangible products, you will need to eventually still have a human in the picture, at least for the next number of years. And so for us, excuse me, that's how we're thinking about that.
Thanks, Juan. Mark, over to you. What do you see coming down the pike over the next 2 to 3 years that you are most excited by?
Yeah, so I made comments at the beginning when it was somebody pitches, the lens I look at that through, and the first one being efficiency. And I think for us, that's where it will remain kind of in the next, 12, 18, 24 months is we'll continue to use it. There's some easy wins that exist, right? Whether it's, help desk kind of things now that you're able to serve, 10,000 plus employees that are constantly calling for, for help, whether it's passwords, whether it's simple things like that. I mean, we found some really easy wins out there that drive real efficiency and real savings. Again, we're in the brokerage business, so we're out there trying to find the best coverage and carriers for clients, and the ability to take 2 different kinds of policy forms, compare coverages that exist within that, and understand those and do that at speed. Those are things that we're investing in. But it's continuing to find, you referenced this, it's continuing to find smaller, quick wins inside of pockets of the business as opposed to trying to do anything transformational with the tool right now. And that's where we're finding the best value, and I think that's where we'll see ourselves continue to invest over the next 12 to 36 months.
Great. From our point of view, one, what you talked about, sentiment analysis, image processing, I think this is definitely coming up next and will be quite useful to add on top of the current tools. The other thing we are seeing also is people think data is oil and they're just collecting massive amounts of it. We don't think data is oil, we think data is soil. You need to dig through a lot of that to find the golden nuggets. So one of our product development is more around what do you do when you have massive amounts of unstructured data? What is useful? What is garbage? And let's use the useful pieces and not worry about boiling the ocean and everything else. Great, so I'm going to open it up for Q&A. We have a few minutes left, and I'll try to look at the iPad to see if folks have been putting any questions in. I don't know if Tom is here. I don't know if there's microphones that people can use, but let me check what questions are coming up. So one question for Juan is how do you effect or implement cultural changes required when you're deploying new tools and people are worried, people are not sure what it is?
Change management is clearly a hugely important part of all of this, particularly when you're looking at thousands of people that are needing to adapt to a new technology. But the way I tend to see it is, it's not necessarily about doing away with jobs. It's about creating different jobs, and it's enabling your workforce to have the skill sets that they need to be able to take advantage and work in a different way. Because it changes the way we all work at the end of the day. But for us, the change management really begins with helping our employees to understand what is AI, providing the training, once they go through the training, providing the tools so they get comfortable with it. And that's ultimately where you can unleash the real power of all of this. It's really in the day-to-day transactions and the activities that you do. Now, one thing that we haven't talked about that's also very important to keep in mind is the risk concept, or the risk area around all of this, to make sure that you're using and deploying artificial intelligence and these very powerful tools in an ethical way, in a very professional way. And so having the right framework within your company to think about, are you using it correctly? Are you not exposing data you're not supposed to be exposing? How do you make sure you're protecting members' data, et cetera? That's an incredibly important part of all of this as well. And one of the things that I also think about too is, we've been talking a lot about what I call the offense part of all of this, which is the good things that you can use AI for. But at the same time, you also got to be very mindful that the bad guys also have these tools. And so how do you continue to protect your organization from individuals who want to have harm or create fraud, et cetera, et cetera. So there's definitely two sides to this coin at the same time. But on the cultural change point, it's really explaining to people the why, giving them the training, and ultimately exposing them to the tools to be able to make this happen.
Yeah, not to repeat what you said, I think it's a great point in terms of, the things that are happening inside of organizations from an AI perspective, and the governance process has not caught up with that, right? Organizations right now are largely not in a position to say, how are we going to control and govern the ability for now all of our people out there to be tapping into this, sometimes using company information or putting company information in a position where it could be compromised. And so for organizations to think about that, it's happening faster than the governance process is able to keep up right now, in my view.
So that's a question for you, Mark, which is, if finance's CEO is the customer, the business folks are the ones you're giving insights to, IT is your in-house vendor.
Yes.
How do you spoon feed some of these insights to a segment or a stakeholder that does not report to you? In a large organization, how do you make it work?
Yeah, see, I don't think that AI is different than any other thing that you try to do inside of an organization that you run into that, right? Where you're providing service to, whether it's, IT is an internal service provider to a function that's then delivering information. I don't think there's anything unique about AI in that equation that is not just good change management and communication that needs to take place. So I don't see that as a barrier.
Great. I'll probably treat this as the last question, which is, what would you advise this group, anybody who's embarking upon AI for the first time, or maybe slightly smaller organization than what you run on, what you've been running, Mark, what would you suggest to them as the first 2 or 3 steps?
Yeah.
Are we supposed to say call Spinnaker?
Yeah.
Is that what we're supposed to say?
That's right.
Oh, good point. Yes, yes.
But let me take a crack at it. I think number one is get up to speed on what it is and what it's not. And I think that's one of the most important things. I personally spent a significant amount of time investing my own time on just getting smart on what technology can and cannot do. And I think that's really the first part of it if you're leading an organization, because once you understand some of that, it really does help you to visualize what this could be used for and the applicability to it. I think that's number one. I think the second thing is something that I said earlier in my comments, which is, in the old world, when new technology would come out, you could say, well, I'm not sure how this is going to work out. I'm just going to wait and see what others do with it, and then I'm going to try to catch up with it. The problem with this is that I don't think that's going to work this time. I think you really are going to If you're a fast follower, you're never going to catch up. So you might as well start looking at use cases and things that are meaningful in the organization that you lead, that you manage, and start working with all of that. As I said earlier, there's a lot of unregrettable bets that I think you can make along the way in all of this just to get started. The other part of it is helping your employees to start thinking about this technology not as a threat, but as something that they need to embrace, and frankly is changing the way we all do business. You know, in the past it used to be that technology was usually led first by the tech companies and business would adapt. This is one where you're seeing both society and business at the same time changing. And that's, I think, pretty unusual. It's not even something that I think we saw with the internet and computer, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this is a very different thing. So I would say learn about it, get on with it pretty quickly, and start helping your employees get comfortable with it.
Thanks. Anything to add to that?
No, matter of fact, I'd yield my time to you. You're an advisor out there that, you know, organizations are hiring in terms of what's your advice to them as to how they start?
I think the only thing I'll add to what Juan is saying is, do not be afraid. This is not going to solve everything, but it's also not going to break everything. Mm-hmm. If you're a driver, you don't need to know how fuel injection works to know that your car is driving better than it used to back in the days of the carburetor. Use these technologies not as crutches, not as something to hide behind, but to genuinely ask, how does it help me? And if it can help me do a better job, by all means, I'll go ahead and do that. I think if you keep that attitude, then you'll be more pragmatic about what makes sense for your organization at this time versus some other organization at a different time. Great. I think we are probably out of time or over time. Thanks. So thanks everybody for your attendance, participation, and questions.